Last Sunday night, I preached a sermon on a specific lifestyle that we have a chance to incorporate. And I appreciate the many positive and comments that were made about how well you liked the sermon and everything. That sermon last Sunday night was sort of a trial balloon with a specific type of sermon. And so over the next few weeks, I want to preach a few more sermons that are somewhat similar to last Sunday night's sermon. You see, I'm convinced that life can be anything and everything that we want it to be. We simply have to choose to want the full, abundant life that Jesus came to provide us with, John 10, verse 10. More than choosing that and just saying, I want it, though, we have to accept it on His terms. And it all starts right where you are right now. The road to anywhere begins where you are right now, today. But what about our past? I mean, all of us have done things in our past that were not exactly what we maybe should have done. Or maybe we haven't done something that we should have done. So what about our past? Doesn't that just sort of box us in and everything? Well, not necessarily. How can we deal with the mistakes that we've made? And how do we overcome humble beginnings to rise to greatness? Well, I was reading in a book the other day a story about a young man named Dave. And Dave didn't start out in a very good position, okay? In fact, his family were shepherds. They were shepherds, and he may or may not have liked it very much. The book didn't say, but he dealt with it. It was his lot in life as far as he could tell, and he was going to make the best of it. And it wasn't as if life with the sheep was dull. I mean, there was plenty of excitement. I mean, on several occasions, a wild animal would come and try and attack the flock, and Dave would have to shoo it away and fight that animal and protect the flock from the animal. And so it was a pretty, there was some excitement to it. But Dave always felt that there was something more in life for him. Then on one occasion, a fairly old man came by to see his father. And then this older gentleman looked at each one of Dave's older brothers. And that was all well and good, but the old man asked his father, is there some other son? And his father had almost forgot that Dave was out with the sheep, doing his job, doing what someone had to stay out in the field with the sheep, with the flocks and everything when this older gentleman came. And so Dave had, since he was the youngest always gets picked on, right? He had to stay out with the sheep and miss the arrival of this older gentleman. Well, anyway, Dave shows up. This old man pours something on top of his head and goes away. The next chapter of Dave's story picks up with his father sending him on a mission to find out how his brothers who had joined the army were doing. When Dave got to the place where his brothers were, he couldn't believe his eyes or his ears. One of the enemy soldiers was making a challenge to the army that Dave was there to see. It was basically a winner-take-all proposition. Not a bad thing, one-on-one, mano-a-mano, and the winner, their army wins the war. Very little, minimized loss of life and time and trouble and everything. Well, Dave couldn't believe that nobody in their army was taking the guy up on it. Yeah, sure, the guy was 9 feet tall, but hey, Well, anyway, Dave talked in his youthful eagerness, talked the king into letting him go out and fight the enemy soldier, and guess what? Just like the enemy soldier thought, it wasn't even close. It wasn't even much of a battle. Dave mopped the floor with him. Well, once the king sees this, he's very impressed by David, needless to say. In fact, he even sends a message to Dave's father asking if Dave could stay in his service. And Dave's father agrees. I mean, the king asks, what are you going to do? Say no? Not really. No, you can't say no to the king. So he sends Dave to be in the service of the king. Dave was a fairly accomplished musician. Many say it came from his time spent in the field with the sheep, that the sheep sort of kind of took care of themselves for the most part, unless there was an outside force, a wild animal or something. And so Dave had lots of time to work on his fingering and everything for playing an instrument. And so he would play when the king got upset or angry. Excuse me. And the king's mood would be soothed, and he calmed down. Dave also served as an armor bearer for the king. And when he was old enough, Dave joined the army. Dave was very successful as a soldier. And as any successful soldier might do, he rose in rank very quickly. Well, the problem with that was that Dave was a little bit too successful for the king. And the king didn't like it very much that he was so successful. And on several occasions, the king himself tried to kill Dave. But each time, Dave escaped. Pardon me. Eventually, to make a long story short, I know, too late, right? The king dies, and who should become king but Dave? Dave started in the sheep pen and ended up in the palace. This is a true story. I'm sure you've recognized it by now, haven't you? It's the story of David, King David from the Old Testament. And the Bible is filled with stories just like David. Stories of people who start at the bottom and end up on top because they are committed to following God. There's the story of Saul of Tarsus. Saul of Tarsus was doing everything within his power to destroy the church. In fact, he even made it his mission, his job. And he went on business trips to different cities around Jerusalem in order to persecute Christians, arrest them, and see that they were punished. On one such trip to Damascus, though, we all know he saw the light in more ways than one. And Saul the persecutor becomes that which he once persecuted, a Christian. He joins that which he tried to destroy. There's also the story of John Mark. John Mark was a young man who was chosen by Paul and Barnabas to go on their first missionary journey with them. What a great honor for him. But somewhere along the road there, John Mark maybe got a little homesick, or for some other reason we don't know, he went home early. He left and went back to his home before the trip was over. Well, when Barnabas and Paul are getting ready to go on their second trip, Barnabas, name means Mr. Encouragement, he wants to give John Mark another chance. Paul's not so eager to give him another chance. And they have such a sharp disagreement that they split company, and two teams were eventually formed. John Mark went with Barnabas on a second missionary journey, and Paul picked someone else, and he went on a journey. It would seem like there was an irreparable rift between Paul and John Mark. But if you look at 2 Timothy 4, verse 11, Paul tells Timothy in a letter, "Get Mark and bring him with you, because he is helpful to me in my ministry." Paul had been wrong about John Mark, and he admitted it. Then, since neither Paul nor John Mark held a grudge, they were able to help each other spread the gospel. And there are many other magnificent stories in the Bible about people who overcame odds. I feel sort of like the author of Hebrews must have felt when he penned Hebrews 11, verses 32 and following. And what more shall I say? I don't have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and all the prophets who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned into strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. You know, the writer of Hebrews has just gone through a laundry list of the great men and some women of faith. And he says, I don't have time to tell about these other people and all the great things that they did. Now, there's a painting that was done by an unknown artist that illustrates the point I'm trying to make. It's a beautiful picture of a country road. And the road winds over the hills and between the lovely trees. It's very picturesque. The sky is lovely, the scenery beautiful. Yeah, it's the kind of picture that you look at and you really wish you were on that road wherever it goes. Because wherever it goes doesn't matter. What's important is you're on that road, because that road is peaceful and it's very serene. The caption on the painting is, "The road to anywhere starts where you are right now." Think about that for a second. The road to anywhere starts where you are right now. There are things that have happened in our past that we can't do a thing about. What we can control and what we can do, though, is control where we go from here. And that's really what this painting is saying. The road to anywhere starts where you are right now. I even thought about seeing if I could find a picture of this painting to put up on the screen so you could see what it looks like. But you know, then I remembered that when I heard about this picture, I recreated the scene, the painting in my own mind about what is most peaceful and serene for me. And I thought, you know, that's kind of what the point is. It reminded me that of where I wanted to be, and it also gave me assurance that I could get there simply by starting right where I was. You know, I could not, and I still can't make it there in a single bound, but I could and still can decide that I'm going to begin, that I'm going to work towards that, and begin walking in small steps towards it. Now, if I held on course, I could go anywhere I wanted to. This is, of course, true for all of us. You can do what you want to do. Go where you want to go and be who you want to be and have what you want to have. So instead of showing you the actual painting, I want you to recreate that painting in your own mind. Make it something personal for you. A place that you want to be. And remember, the road that leads where you want to go starts where you are right now. Glenn and his two brothers, Floyd and Raymond, and his sister, Letha, hurried the 2 miles to school that day. Cold, windy morning in Rolla, Kansas. Population 180. The year was 1916, and Glenn was 7 years old. When they got to school, the teacher hadn't arrived yet, and so Floyd went over to the fireplace to start a fire. He poured what he thought was kerosene on the wood, but it wasn't kerosene. It was gasoline. And when he lit that match, there was a horrible explosion, and Floyd screamed, "I'm on fire!" And then Glenn realized that he was on fire too. They screamed for the other two to throw some sand on them as they ran outside. And you know the whole roll on the ground thing? Well, the ground was too frozen to do anything for him. And so they kept screaming, and they thought, well, we have to get home. Floyd screamed, and the other kids just stared in horror. Floyd was virtually naked. The top of his jacket and smoking shoes were all that was left on his blackened body. Remembering the words of their father, "Don't quit," they ran in a frenzied effort to get to where they could be helped. Somehow they made it to the farmhouse. Glenn fainted within sight of the house. And it was one tragedy, it seemed, after another. Floyd died shortly thereafter. Glenn was horribly burned, and the doctor worked feverishly to save his life. He was able to save Glenn's life, but the doctor also said that Glenn would never be able to walk again. He further told Glenn's parents that if infection set in, he might have to amputate his legs. Glenn's condition grew worse. Infection did set in, but by somehow they managed not to have to amputate. But the doctor reiterated that Glenn would never walk again. Glenn overheard those terrible words spoken by the doctor to his parents, and he screamed, I will walk again. And his grieving mother turned and looked at him and said very evenly, yes, Glenn, you'll walk again. Then came months of daily treatment with ointments and salve. Glenn's father was a runner who he could run like the wind. And he said that Glenn, even though Glenn was only 7 years old, he said he was a natural in running. And he taught Glenn everything he knew about pumping his arms and lengthening his stride in order to run longer and faster. He taught him how to pace himself for endurance. And all that was worth nothing right now, though, because this 7-year-old boy was burned so badly, they said he would never even walk again, let alone run. It was 6 months after the accident that Glenn tried his first step, but he fell in a heap. He wasn't going to give up, though. He kept trying, he kept struggling, and one day his mother had wheeled him outside in his chair to get some fresh air. When she wasn't looking, he got out of his chair, flung himself to the ground, and used his arms to drag himself to their picket fence at the edge of the yard. He pulled himself up and he dragged himself around the yard using his hands, trying to use his legs as best he could. He repeated this every day, and eventually there was a path that was worn around the yard where his legs had been dragged. But about a year later, he was able to walk just a few steps. Shortly after that, he was able to manage somewhat of a limping jog. His family moved to Elkhart, Kansas, population 1,160. Within a year, Glenn could manage the 2-mile walk to school, but he couldn't run without pain. By the time he was 12, though, he was able to run again. Glenn entered the mile run in school. He was smaller than all of the other boys. Didn't have their fancy running clothes, but he did have something they didn't have. He remembered all of those lessons so many years ago from his father of how to run and run fast. And he used everything his father taught him, and he won that mile race. Glenn Cunningham went on to become a great champion. He was the outstanding miler of his day. He won 21 out of 31 races he entered in Madison Square Garden and set world records in the mile and 1,500 meters. At the end of his track career, he established the Cunningham Youth Ranch, where he and his wife helped thousands of troubled youth over a 30-year period. The road to anywhere starts where you are right now. It's been said that your past explains you, but it doesn't lock you in. That's so true. Your past can lock you in, and for some people it does lock them in, but it doesn't have to. If you don't believe me, consider the story of Joseph. Joseph was in a precarious situation from the get-go. He was favored by his father and hated by his brothers. So Joseph is sold into slavery in Egypt. And while in Egypt, through no fault of his own, He was thrown into jail for an attempted rape that he didn't even attempt. Okay? He didn't do anything wrong. He did what was right. And he got punished for it. He got put in prison. But Joseph refused to give up. When bad things happened to him, Joseph didn't give in to bitterness, self-pity, or the why me attitude and philosophy. His persistence in goodness and his unwavering faith in God led him to go from that prison to being second in command of all of Egypt, which was the most powerful nation in the world at that time. And he was allowed to rescue his family and his nation from poverty and from a famine. This set up the entire scenario, incidentally, for Jesus to come into the world. You might say that Joseph started that journey upward from the depths of a cistern, which his own brothers had thrown him into. And yet he ends up in the palace of the most powerful monarch of that day. You might say the story of Joseph is one that led from the pit to the pinnacle. Truly, the road to anywhere starts where you are right now. You know, as I mentioned earlier, David's story might be called from kid to king. Saul of Tarsus, from oppressor to apostle. The story of John Mark could be called from deserter to disciple. And in 1 Corinthians 6, verses 9 through 11, Paul writes these words, "Don't you know that the wicked will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived, neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor male prostitutes, nor homosexual offenders, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor slanderers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God." Those are some bad things, right? But look at what he says right after that. "And that is what some of you were. But you were washed, you were sanctified, you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and by the Spirit of God." They went from immoral to immortal. You see, you can get knocked down in life, but you don't have to stay down. There are many, many contemporary examples of people who had bad things happen to them. People who were faced with seemingly devastating situations, and yet somehow they were able to shine through. And they make movies about fictional characters, like Rocky Balboa. Actually, they make 5 movies about him, or 6. And then they have Creed, and everything, and Apollo's son and all this other stuff and everything. But because that type of a story sells. Okay? It's the same story every single time, but people pay money to go and see the movie because they like to see that sort of thing. They overcome odds. But they really don't need to look any further than real life for heroes. What's my point? The point is that although we might suffer setbacks, they don't have to break our backs. Some people let setbacks defeat and destroy them. Others see setbacks as yet one more golden opportunity to overcome the odds and succeed where everyone says it cannot be done. Let's take the opportunities we have and go with them. That's what David did. That's what Paul did. That's what John Mark did. That's what Joseph did. That's what the Corinthians did. And that's what God would have us do as well. And all of this starts where you are right now. Remember, the road to anywhere starts where you are right now. So where are you? And where do you want to go? Where do you want to be? It doesn't matter where you've been. Doesn't matter how many knocks life has dealt you. The road is there. The choice is up to you. The road leads where you want it to lead. You can learn from failures, which incidentally turn those failures into successes, or failures can defeat you. But it's your choice. So which do you choose? You see, the greatest victory, though, is a victory that happens when we give ourselves over to Christ. And not only give ourselves totally and wholly to Him. It's sort of odd, isn't it? That the way that you win the greatest victory is to surrender and give up everything that you have and everything that you are. But God can take what you are and what you have and make it something incredible if we'll just trust Him to lead us through His Word. Things aren't right between you and God. Why not make them right tonight? Make them right tonight because we're not guaranteed that we're going to have it tomorrow for you to make them right. We're not guaranteed there's going to be a next Sunday. We're not guaranteed there's going to be this is the 6 o'clock hour. We're not guaranteed there's going to be a 7 o'clock hour tonight. So if things aren't right between you and God, make them right tonight. And if we can help you through a public response, won't you let us know by coming to the front as we stand and sing together?